Hello.
Hello.
Having a few tech issues. You can see I'm in from my green office at the moment, but we've got it. We've got it. So this is say Roy and talking to Sarah Plant from People Team Solutions, and Sarah came up with a great title for this discussion, which was I just want them out of my company. So let's put a bit of context in this. Sarah, what do People Team Solutions get up to?
So we're a HR consultancy, and we support businesses with their people, with the things that crop up that they are unsure about, whether that's based on legislation or just general day-to-day discussions that they're having.
So HR then.
HR then, yeah.
Just
Sounds easy, doesn't it? HR then.
it does when you put it that way, I guess. So I mean, the sort of things. What sort of companies do you deal with? What sort of organisations do you deal with?
So I work with organisations that really look after their people. They see their people and the importance in ensuring that their people know what is expected of them, that they achieve and strive for really high performance, and that are really open and honest with them, transparent in what they're trying to achieve, so that people have got the very best chance of achieving that and supporting the growth of the business and the profits, etc., that the business is trying to achieve as well.
So using good people management skills to get the best out of people and grow the business. Well, that sounds to me like a no-brainer. So every company's got to this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that would be the case. People I often speak to sometimes don't feel they need HR or even an employment contract. Why give somebody an employment contract? I've been doing it for 15 years. They don't, I've never had a problem in the last 15 years, and I absolutely get that. When you don't see those problems the other end, you can kind of feel like you're okay. It's like parking in a space that you're not meant to park in, but you keep getting away with it, so it's okay, until the day you don't get away with it anymore. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. So often I do speak to businesses that have found that problem, and at that point we're then having to deal with the sort of reactive nature of it rather than the proactive side. So it's not always as plain sailing.
So I guess this is the thing. When everything's working fine, you don't worry about it. It's like taking your car for a service, isn't it? It's you don't worry about taking your car for a service. So it's run over a little bit, and all of a sudden it's run a long way over, and you're parked up by the side of the motorway with smoke coming out the front. So I mean, what can happen? You've got a situation, you've never needed it, and then all of a sudden you do. What does that look like?
Well, it varies massively because obviously we're dealing with people, and every single situation that you deal with a person is going to be different. We've got different priorities in life, different expectations. And so it's a real challenge actually for business owners and managers to understand what to do next. But I've seen cases that involve a number of different processes. So you might have somebody that isn't quite performing the way they should be, and a manager attempts a conversation to say, this isn't quite working. We need to do something about it. But they've probably not received any training on how to have that conversation. The expectations may well not have been set up front. And so from an employee perspective, from that person, the first thing they hear is, I'm not doing well. Well, we often go into work to do well. We want to do a good job. So hearing that from somebody, potentially for the first time, not knowing what those expectations are, unfortunately results often in a slight overreaction to that conversation. And that overreaction can end up feeling like, oh, my manager's bullying me, they're harassing me, it's all about the figures, they just want me to perform, or they're making me ill, I feel really stressed now, I'm going to go and see my doctor, I'm going to be signed off sick, or we put those grievances in, and it all starts to become very, very complicated. So what I try to do is very much talk to people up front and be really proactive about it, so that those conversations don't come as a surprise. They already know that they're not quite performing where they are, and they know what support they can get to get them there.
I mean, I'm just thinking of the situation that it's like, where does the car wreck? Does it is it when the metal starts hitting something, you're hearing the crunching, or is it further down the road? I mean, when should I mean, you start a company, everything's going sort of well. You have one or two people. At which point, do we have to worry about HR? Is it at one employee or five employees? Is there a legal need for this, or can we just ignore it and get away with it?
So you absolutely don't need to have a HR consultant on board. You just don't need that. From a legal perspective, certainly, legally people are required to have what's known as sort of statement of particulars, which we reference an employment contract. They're entitled to that from day one of employment. So if you're not doing that already and you've taken on your first person, you're already not really following the legislation. And people often think, well, why is an employment contract important? I'm not going to give it to them because then they're almost not an official employee. Well, unfortunately, that isn't the case in tribunal situations. You're an employee as soon as you're paid as an employee, and that's it. There's no argument about that. But if people don't know what is expected from that employment contract, so how much notice is somebody going to serve? So they might think that they're entitled to 3 months' notice from you. You may think it's only a week. But who's right? If you've not had that conversation, you've not written it down. What about your holidays? How many holidays do we get? And again, we've got our statutory minimums, but without setting those standards up front and being really clear about it, you're likely to lose people, or they're going to get a bit annoyed about it.
And I guess that affects other people, and bad news always travels faster than good news. It's not going to make it. It's not going to make it into the papers or onto Twitter if you've been given an employment contract and set up correctly. That sort of good news doesn't travel. It's the other way, isn't it?
Absolutely. And people that employers that focus on their people will get better results. You get to attract better people that have got common values, people that really want to support your business. You get loyalty, that reputation, whether that's as a customer. You want people that if they do choose to leave your business for whatever reason, are champions of your business, not people that are, slagging it off and getting a bit annoyed by it, and suggesting that you don't want to go there, let alone as an employee, but sometimes not even as a customer. So for me, it is very much about that communication side of things and talking to people, getting to know them, and making sure that we're doing right by them.
So I love what you said there. Attract better people, champions of your business, always looking for good people as well, because hopefully you're doing the right things. That news will eventually trickle out, I guess. But I mean, what sort of you can go to the FSB or the chambers, and you can Google it or search employment. That'll do, right?
And in some circumstances, absolutely. If you don't end up in a tribunal situation further on down the line, and you just happen to have the right clauses in that covers you at that time, I think one of the things that HR consultants offer is a better understanding of the business, and therefore we can advise around the clauses that might be needed for that business to give that extra protection. We can absolutely source things online and policies and things like that. But the problem with lots of things, and people can buy, policies from anywhere and shove them on a shelf somewhere. But actually, unless you're going to implement those policies properly and actually help people to understand what's in them and what they mean, and things, then you might as well not even bother getting them free off the internet, because if they're only going to sit on a shelf, you're basically setting yourself up. You're going to end up in a tribunal potentially where the tribunal is saying, well, you know what you should be doing because you've got a policy for it. So if you're not following that policy, it's almost worse. You might as well not have it in the first place.
Yeah, I've got a comment here. There we go. We can learn so much from our universities to treat leavers, champion alumni, sharing what they're doing now based on what they've learned with them.
Love that.
Can you imagine a world where organisations did the same? I must admit, it sounds great to me. Can you imagine a world where organisations did the same?
Absolutely. I think we're starting to see organizations that, aren't angry when people leave, but they recognize that actually they've done a really, really good job of supporting people's development and getting them to stretch. If they've not got the right opportunities for that next step, then absolutely it's the right thing for people to go externally. That doesn't mean they're never going to come back though. That doesn't mean that they aren't going to have involvement with those people again in the future. So if we can be in a position where we're explaining that as a business we've been able to develop these individuals to look what they've achieved as a result, that again it's an amazing attraction tool. Yeah, Danny, brilliant idea.
Yeah, and certainly I think, thank you, Danny, for that. I think certainly within Sandler, there's we were working with an organisation who wanted to get developers into the business, but they were saying all the developers, all they ever wanted to do was work for Google or Microsoft and we couldn't get hold of people. But their whole approach changed to, well, let's prepare them for the next job, Google, Microsoft. And actually, a number of things happened. A few of them did go, which was they saw as a win. But actually, quite a lot of them stayed because they liked the environment where they were looked after, befriended, cared for, developed, and somebody who was outside of their management structure was making sure all the right things were done from a I'm not saying bias perspective or self-interest perspective, but from the point of view of the company rather than their own department. Because I mean, the last thing, as a manager, the last thing you want is your good people getting promoted and going elsewhere because you like them where they are, right?
It is really, really difficult. We expect an awful lot of our managers. They've got to, be that confidant with their people. They've got to motivate them. They've got to reward them and recognise them. They've got to help them with their performance, put all the support in place, make sure their training's up to date and everything is compliant. Look at health and safety. The list goes on for a manager. So that's sometimes where HR consultants come in actually, because we can kind of unpick some of the things that are going on. So from just a conversation, we can help direct them, give them some ideas, take the load off a little bit when actually they're feeling some real pressure to hit results, hit results, hit results. But sometimes they also need a bit of someone to talk to and just make sure they're okay as well, because they're delivering quite a lot.
And yeah, I think that's a good point, especially from a small organisation where the leader quite often is the founder, and if they're doing stuff that someone else can do more effectively and actually up to date, that's got to take the stress off that bit of the world is covered. And as you mentioned, the parking slot, sitting in a parking slot, you've got to wait. You just keep on getting away with it, but it's niggling on the background, isn't it? When I go back to it, is there going to be a ticket there? Yeah, sitting on a train without a ticket, that's another one.
It's really difficult, and I have business owners that come to me, and they say that there's been a weight lifted because actually they can share fairly confidential stuff about their business, about their people, with somebody that they can really trust with that information, and can advise them as a result. And for me, some of it is just listening, some of it is absolutely advising, but it is about finding the best way to support our clients in to achieve their goals. It's not about me, it's about their goals.
Yeah, and I love that. And I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. We started a little bit late, but we're about halfway through. So I want to get to the crux of this. Someone picks up the phone to you. You're having a good day. You're just doing what you do. They picks up the phone, and they're screaming down the phone, "I've got this person. I just want them out of my company." I mean, what's going through your head at that point?
So at that point, I can recognise that this is a reaction to something that's probably been brewing for some time. So what we tend to find is that actually we're quite flexible. So we let people get away with something that we don't quite agree with for probably quite some time if it's something not too big. So they might be just a little bit late, two, three times here and there, but they're doing a good job, so it's okay. Or they might just keep missing that deadline, or not quite delivering here, there, or wherever. And we let it slide, and we let it slide, and we let it slide until a point where we go, well, that's it, I've had enough, I'm done. They're going, and that's the point where often people will speak to me and they'll go, help me to get them out. I want them gone. And so apart from the fact that I often ask people to take some time to think about how you feel. Let's start from the beginning. So, how long's the person been with your business for? What have you seen historically in terms of their performance? Is this a new thing, or is this something that's been going on for some time? How do they know what is expected from them?
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
If someone's come on to you and said, "Hey, I've been dealing with the HR. It's never been bothering me before. I've not had a jot of trouble, and now I have." I mean, do you have to go right back to the beginning, start setting the whole business up correctly? I mean, it sounds to me like if something's broken, it isn't broken just there; it's broken back there, and we need to do something about it from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I tend to do is I deal with the immediate issue, and we, provide some advice, support, and that can be literally whatever the client wants from our perspective. So we can do some very remote work. So I've dealt with redundancies, disciplinaries virtually. I work with clients in London and all around the country. But likewise, I've got some clients that want that extra support to some degree, even for somebody to even lead that meeting because they've never done it before. And actually, it's a really scary thing to sit in front of somebody
Right.
doing a disciplinary for the first time, and things like that. So the role I play varies significantly from one client to another, depending on what they need. But for me, it's about that immediate issue and then working with the client to understand, okay, so overall, what do we now need to look at to be that bit more proactive so that we don't find ourselves in this position again? And that can be some very basic changes. It doesn't have to cost the earth or take too much time, but it is about that commitment to your people, and about that regular communication, and having somebody independent to challenge it can just make that bit of a difference.
And again, if they continue doing things their own way, it can end up messy in a tribunal, and that can be quite a costly event, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about things like discrimination, it's uncapped. So that's a scary position to be in. To think that we could essentially make a decision unknowingly, that can cause problems. Because unfortunately, just not knowing it doesn't stand up in a tribunal. Businesses are expected to know. It's part of their expectations,
So
and that can be difficult.
so hang on a second. So something you said there just triggered. Businesses, if you get to a tribunal, businesses are expected to know, and if you don't know, woe betide you, right? Because that sounds like it could be expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not uncommon for businesses to pay out, thousands and thousands of pounds on these things. As we've already said, there are also businesses that have just never been taken to tribunal, but we can't stop claims from going in. So, as a HR consultant, my role is to mitigate that risk as much as possible to make sure we've got the documents, wherever possible. That we can evidence that we've had conversations with people about things. People, unfortunately, don't always tell the truth, and so it's very hard at tribunal to be able to back yourself up if you've not got the documentation to do that. And in my role as HR consultant, support businesses to get that structure to make sure that actually we are documenting the things that are important, but not making a big meal of it where we've got to document everything because it just becomes a tick
Yeah.
box exercise
Uh,
then.
It's like, I mean, running a business is like owning a car that you love. You wouldn't think about not taking it for a service. Why would you not think about making sure that it's all set up properly for its HR? Why would you do that? I've got a comment on here from Danny going back a couple of minutes. I just want to bring this up.
Yeah.
And I love this. We've set the expectations through our inaction and tolerance. We're making a rod for our own backs. Culture are the worst behaviours that we tolerate. And certainly I do this when I do management training. One of the exercises I do, I say things that we tolerate in our organisation, and things that you mentioned, running over a bit late with a project, turning up late, having an extended dinner hour, leaving work early, random unexplained sicknesses. We tolerate these things. And then I cross out that line. I go, the culture of our business is. And then you look at all of these things. And if you go, ooh, there's a problem. So yeah, culture is the worst behaviors that we tolerate. And again, I guess once you start tolerating them, they become the rules, right? It's hard to say, if we've tolerated them for years, it's hard to change them.
Absolutely, and again, it's about communicating those changes and including people, so helping people to understand why we're tightening up our processes if that's what we're doing. What's in it for them. Tell that story, take people on a journey. They're much more likely to take that on board and be in with that idea if they understand why it's happening. Often when it doesn't work, it's because someone higher up has just made a decision, and we maybe send an email out and hope someone reads it, and things aren't going to change in that way. So we've got to invest the time with our people to help them to fully understand what we're trying to achieve as a business to get there.
So if you're trying to change, improve, modify, fix a culture, having someone like you around can make sure it's done in a way that isn't going to leave them open to all of these other risks. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think somebody outside of the organisation can act very independently. We can see some of the whole. It's like when somebody checks something you've written. You write it. You think it says exactly what you need it to say, and then someone looks at it and they can find a number of different errors in it, can't they? Because actually they're coming with different set of expectations. They're coming with different eyes, and you're imagining almost what you've done, what you've said, how you've positioned it, and so it's opening yourself up, which is very brave for people to do, to a little bit of challenge. And I like to think that I do that in the most respectful way possible. But we're here to learn, we're here to develop. We want really successful businesses, and for that to happen, our people need to be on board with it too.
I love that, and it's that old phrase, and I repeat it in my class quite a lot, from George Bernard Shaw. The biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it ever happened. Danny, you've sparked something in Danny today. He said something else there. Now there we go.
Thank you, Danny.
Going back a few minutes, yeah. Decision isn't usually the issue with tribunals. It's more about the decision-making process. Do you have a process, and did you follow it? Well, that makes sense. Is that the case?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the other challenge is, of course, and I touched on it a little bit earlier on. We have these processes, we put them in a drawer somewhere, and then we don't follow them. So it can cause some major issues by having all these things documented if we're not going to do anything about it.
It is one of these things you sort of do. You stick it in the drawer, then something goes wrong, and you go and find you pull out the drawer and go, and bats flutter off, and then you're looking at it again. It's it's got to be a living, breathing approach that is communicated, reminded, checked, and I think so for management, it should be more of a matter of catching people doing right and
Absolutely.
praising and supporting that, rather than the old mill owner. Talk about carrot and stick, mostly stick. And right should be well documented. The sort of characteristics, sort of culture that we support, that we encourage in this. So it becomes quite clear. Without even those basics, people meander off on their own world, don't they?
Absolutely. And I think businesses feel that recognition and reward needs to be something major. We need to do a big Christmas party where the bar's free and all this sort of stuff. And the reality is that yeah,
I'll
people
go.
like that. Yeah, yeah, me too. Absolutely love a free bar. But likewise, I also like a really basic thank you and that general everyday recognition when somebody's done something that we can be proud of. And I think that we overcomplicate things sometimes. For me, with people, it is that I keep going on about communication, but it all comes back to the communication. You get that right, and actually a lot of the things follow. It doesn't matter what's in your policies or your processes because the people are already on board. So it's about constantly making sure that you're communicating everything you're thinking so that they can actually take that on board and be with you.
Danny's on it again. He's let's see what he's got to say this time. Oh, there we go. You stop saying it. There you go. Just stop saying interesting things so Danny can have a rest. Thank you, Danny. So I mean, we're getting into the last couple of minutes. Let's pretend I'm just starting up. I've got an office. Businesses beginning to come in, and I'm looking around and I go, right, now's the time to expand. Whereabout do I pick up the phone and talk to Sarah Plant at People Team Solutions? When does that happen?
So for me, it's about that first point where you think I might take somebody on here. I don't know if it's a consultant or a contractor or an employee, but actually, I'd like to take somebody on. And what we do is we just generally talk about what their needs are, and we work out whether actually employment is the right way. Because that's not always going to be the right thing for somebody to do. A consultant may well be right, or a contractor of some sort. But if you are taking on that first employee, we want to understand, so what role are they going to play, and have we documented what their job is? What do we want to pay for them to do that, and can we afford to pay them for what they're doing? What are the other elements? So your pension, for example, and even if you're not doing your own payroll, there's going to be a cost implication there for someone else to do that. Have you got your insurance? Are they going to be driving? What are you going to pay for in terms of that driving? Are they going to have a company car? Are they going to have a car allowance? Are they going to have to use their own? Are they going to just pay mileage? So there's so many different things to start thinking about when you first think about taking on that first person. Um, and often we've almost taken them on before we start thinking about those things. So the person's joining the organisation having no real understanding of what they're entitled to. It's probably not documented, and it's a bit of a loyalty thing. So they initially come in because they're excited and they'll be loyal. But actually, if we don't set it up in the right way, we can lose them very quickly, and that's a waste of money, time, effort, and that seems a shame in itself. So, there's not a one quick fix or anything to this sort of thing. It does take time, and I think unfortunately we don't always set that time aside. So what I try and do is help manage those expectations and give people things to think about, so they can make those decisions up front before the person's already in the business.
Marvelous. So Danny's there again. Here we go. Uh, uh, it's a small, consistent, authentic things. If my missus bought me a bunch of flowers, I don't think no. Pack of six, that'd be nice. But I think he's right what Danny's saying. We have to look after our people, and it is the consistent, authentic things that show you give a damn. And I was reading a Deloitte report just last week, I think it was. There's 570,000 fewer people available than jobs out there.
Yeah.
So people have got choices, and as an employer you should really be thinking about making sure you do the right things by your people, because
Yeah.
they've got choices. They can go and leave you in all sorts of trouble, and even if they just leave and nothing else, that's a bad thing, because you've got to go recruiting. But say if you mess up the system, it sounds like it could be expensive. Well, thank you very much, Danny. That's great. So it getting close now. We've just got about another minute to go. How can people get hold of Sarah to talk about these things?
So we've got a website, People Team Solutions, so www.peopleteamsolutions.co.uk. Contact details are all on there. And for me, it's not about, you know, knowing that you definitely want HR support. It's just about that initial conversation. I've got no problem with helping and supporting people in those early stages, and it doesn't have to cost the earth. So it is just about having some initial conversations to understand if we can help.
Are you a .co.uk?
I'm a .co.uk.
There we go. Let's see if something happens there. Show. Let's see if this works. Oh, well, I've typed off the
Just missed
K.
the K.
It was in there.
Good
It
try.
was in there. Never mind. Really appreciate you coming along. It's great to hear about the sort of stuff. Some thought-provoking things there, doing the right things, but by your good people, making sure you stay out of trouble. And again, as Danny mentioned and you mentioned, it's all about processes, making sure you follow a process to protect the people, protect the company, protect the bottom line, and just be a good employer.
Absolutely, yeah. And treat people like people.
Treat people like people in your team. There's something in the name about that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll get
Not a
off. We've
problem.
just run over by a minute. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Plant, People Team Solutions. Take care.
Thank you.
Wave. That's friendly.